Hi, I'm Nina Kilbride, and this is Law as Angry Birds in 4D. Most of us have played Angry Birds. It's a fun video game, and some educators think it can teach us about physics while we play. I think they're on to something, and I think we can use it to learn to think like lawyers. You see, Angry Birds is modeled on Newtonian physics in 2D. A player loads a projectile with potential energy, calculates a trajectory, and lets it fly, practicing again and again and again until the player gets good at achieving the desired effect. This sort of learning by doing, trial and error problem solving is called a heuristic method of learning. And it's one that lawyers should be familiar with because it's what we do. It's also what business, industry, and humans do to get better at their jobs. We can see the Angry Birds analogy in this softball pitcher. She loads her projectile with potential energy, calculates a trajectory, and lets it fly, practicing again and again until she can throw that perfect strike. But at the plate, this Angry Bird calculates a trajectory of his own.
Long drive, right field, grand slam! Oh my! Grand slam!
Now it's easy to see the Angry Birds analogy in baseball, but in law it's a little more abstract. I like to think it looks like this. A murmuration of starlings is a flock of birds that, when they come together, move in undulating waves that seem to take on lives of their own. Yet within that flock, each bird maintains its individuality. Thinking like a lawyer is being able to navigate a trajectory for any one of those birds throughout the seamless web of the law that changes just like this flock does. One place that's really instructive to study law as Angry Birds is in Supreme Court opinions. You can see a panel of judges loading up an opinion, calculating a trajectory, and letting it fly to have its effect on the issue. Now at the Supreme Court, the trajectory of the case is going to be limited by the issue on which it came up. However, in dissents, the judges are not so bounded. And so Law as Angry Birds in 4D gets interesting in dissents. The master of Law as Angry Birds in 4D is Justice Scalia in his dissents. In law school, we studied them, and a lot of folks wanted to dismiss them as slippery slope arguments or sore loser arguments. But I think to dismiss the rationale of any Supreme Court justice so lightly is a mistake. There must be a reason that Scalia is so over the top with his dissents. And it's because he thinks he has a job he needs to get done. We recently had some opinions that came out that we can study this. In King versus Burwell, the case that held that the Affordable Care Act was constitutional, Justice Scalia issued a blistering dissent. It was a 5-4 decision, hotly contested, high profile. And so it wasn't surprising that he had a lot to say, but it was a little bit surprising the way he decided to say it. For example, he called the majority's rationale interpretive jiggery-pokery, and also pure applesauce. Those are not legal terms of art. Those are pure silliness. And then a couple weeks later, we have the Obergefell versus Hodges decision, the case that upheld same-sex marriage in the United States. Again, another hot case, 5-4 decision. Scalia found himself in the minority, and he did not like it. And so in this case, he goes all out. Sky is falling on the majority's hijacking of the democratic process, as he would characterize it. He even goes so far as to characterize the majority opinion as a judicial putsch, which is a reference to Hitler's beer hall putsch. You may be familiar with the rhetorical rule that says that the person who brings up Nazi Germany in argument, if we're not talking about Nazi Germany, loses all credibility. Now let's assume that Justice Scalia knows that rule. Let's also assume that he knows more legal terms for applesauce and jiggery-pokery. So why did he go so over the top in his language in these cases? It was because of the nature and speed with which the law evolved in these two cases. What made the King versus Burwell and Obergefell versus Hodges cases different was that they played out in the 24-hour news cycle, and that you could watch people and representatives change their mind in real time. Justice Scalia, in dissent, figured out a way to capitalize on the 24-hour news cycle that brought the majority opinions to bear. He went over the top in the silliness of his language, and it paid off for him, because once the furor of the cases having changed the law died down, the news cycle still wanted to talk about it. So they started to talk about Justice Scalia and his language in dissent. Why did Justice Scalia need to get on the front page? Not because he personally needs it, but because it was where he could disseminate his ideas. Justice Scalia sees the majority opinion as representing a problem, and in dissent, he looks for people who agree with him and instructs them on ways that they might be able to resist the change that the majority opinion represents in the future. And that's why he got himself in the news cycle, not to be on the front page, but to reach people who agreed with him and instruct them accordingly. It's law as Angry Birds. Practice, practice, practice.